Good morning. It's the early show with Rick and Lola. All right. I'm a history fan. A lot of people know this. And there is one guy that I find absolutely incredible when it comes to his films. He calls them films, not documentaries. That is Ken Burns. Maybe you've seen the U.S. and the Holocaust, the Civil War, baseball, jazz, the war, the national parks, all on PBS. They usually run them during special times of the year. And now we've got a new film from Mr. Ken Burns. It's called Inside the Mind of a Genius, Leonardo da Vinci, a film by Ken Burns, Sarah Burns, and David McMahon. And it's going to air on PBS November 18th and 19th at 8 p.m. And I had the great privilege to speak with Ken Burns about this project. And here is that conversation.
Hey, Lola.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We are talking today about your new 2-part, 4-hour film, Leonardo da Vinci. Now, a lot of people know from my personal favorites, Civil War, baseball, jazz. But this is, how did we get to Da Vinci?
Yeah, well, it's the first non-American topic, and I've told people all my life that if I were given 1,000 years to live, I'd never run out of topics in American history, and that's true. What's not true is I won't be given 1,000 years to live, so I've been working on American topics, but we interrupted to do this because he's arguably the man of the last millennium. He's the greatest artist of his time and the greatest scientist of his time, and we're still finding out how much of his science, without the benefit of a telescope or a microscope, is true, like the workings of the heart. It took us discovering MRIs to confirm what his, late 15th century, early 16th century writings about the heart, his investigations of it. But he also knows about the rest of the anatomy. He knows about botany. He knows about water dynamics. He knows about the flight of birds. He knows about atmosphere. He knows about painting. He knows about philosophy. He knows about everything. And this is, as Sir Kenneth Clark said, the most curious man on earth. And so, strangely and paradoxically, for a subject which has been dead for longer than any other subject we've, investigated, human being, he seems the most modern of all those people, the most interesting and the most inspiring. I mean, Abraham Lincoln is up there, but it is spectacular how inspirational the life of Leonardo is for us.
That's amazing. Now, did you have it on your bucket list to do
one? No, not at all.
How did we get here?
So I was working on a film about Benjamin Franklin, and one of the people I was working with was a biographer, one of the many biographers of Franklin, named Walter Isaacson. Walter was a good friend, and Walter had also written a biography of Leonardo. I hadn't read it, and one evening at dinner he kept pushing me to do Leonardo. He said, Franklin's the greatest scientist of his age, Leonardo's the greatest scientist of his, Franklin's an artist in his right as a writer and humorist, and Leonardo is obviously the greatest artist of his time. And I said, Walter, I just don't do American stuff. And I went out and sort of perturbed after this dinner and called my daughter, Sarah Burns, and my son-in-law, David McMahon, who we've collaborated on Muhammad Ali and Jackie Robinson in the Central Park Five, and just said, Walter wanted me to do this, and he said, it's a great idea. So this old dog decided to learn a new trick. And so even though this is a story that takes place across an ocean, on another continent, in another country, in a different language, we got into this. Sarah and Dave moved to Florence with my 2 oldest grandkids for a year, from the summer of 22 to the summer of 23, and filmed the Italian landscape, filmed the archives, filmed the workshops that still do things the way he did in Florence 500 plus years ago, and came back, and we've been editing it, and now it's done, and I'm as excited about this project, as inspired by this project as anything I've ever done, because this is the most curious man who's ever lived, Sir Kenneth Clark thought, and he's asking questions about everything, and he learns about everything. And his 6,000 pages of notebooks that were never published in his lifetime, obviously theories on paintings, but all the other subjects I've been talking about are still vibrant and alive and meaningful for us today. And he's also not Gandalf, this wizard. He's a funny, droll, musically talented stager of big pageants and theatricals, and a singer and great company. And, you know, as one of our French consultants says, he's a work of art before he even started to make art. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful story of something. And people always ask me, what do you want folks to get out of this film? And I always say, no, we've worked a long time. You'll get out what you want to get out, Civil War or baseball or jazz or, you know, country music, whatever the subject that we've done. But this time I go, I want everybody to want to be more like Leonardo, because that's what I feel after I've gotten to know him. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you all what we learned in the process. We weren't going to regurgitate and tell you what we think you should know. That's called homework. We're going to share with you our process of discovery, and boy, did we discover, you know, an extraordinary human being.
That's one of the things that I love about your films is it doesn't feel lecture-y at all.
No,
I mean, you're engaged.
It's first of all, you know, people, when you say the word history and people kind of roll their eyes, they think it's something useless and irrelevant. It's not. History, you know, if you don't know where you've been, you can't possibly know where you are or where you're going. But the word history is mostly made up of the word story, and that's what human beings do with one another. They tell stories, like, honey, how was your day? Right? Mm-hmm. That we tell stories. And so if you tell stories and it doesn't feel like a lesson, it's as dramatic as anything. Sometimes more so because it's true than what Hollywood turns out, right? And it's true. And when you get, you know, I'm working on a history of the American Revolution, when you get to understand the complexity of that story, or the genius of Leonardo da Vinci, or the, you know, the poetry of Hank Williams, you suddenly, I think it just, for me, it helps, it bursts alive this curiosity and inspiration. So I want to be more like Leonardo.
Yeah. Again, we are talking to Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Ken Burns about his new 2-part, 4-hour film exploring Leonardo da Vinci, and it's going to be on PBS the 18th and 19th of November, and then it'll be streaming next day there. And Mr. Burns, I can tell from just your voice that this is something that you are so excited and so passionate about. Is there one thing that you've walked away from this project maybe being enlightened?
Oh, there are so many things. I mean, every day of working on this was a revelation, discovering a new aspect. You know, he figured out and made a model of the human heart. And up to that point, everybody said there's only 2 chambers in the heart. He said, no, I think there are 4. And he figures this thing out. And he does with little pieces of silk and with water and grass seed, he's pumping in. He describes how the functions of the heart valve work. Mm-hmm. And it takes 475 years for MRIs to prove what he knew. And there was no use for it in his time. There was no cardiology. There was no heart surgery. No, people just died. Nobody got operated on. And so he just wanted to find out about it. And that and 10,000 other things, Lola, which we don't have time to go into, are these revelations that he came to. It's just phenomenal. He's just, you know, he's named after the patron saint Leonardo of freedom. Mm-hmm. And that to me says everything. And so he'll feel utterly familiar to Americans, you know?
He's really so much a part of our lives and we don't even realize it.
We don't realize that so much of what we appreciate is come from him and his knowledge.
Right. I do have one final question. I know we're pushing on time here, but just kind of a fun one. Were you able to prove the Da Vinci Code?
That's very funny. Remember that movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, in which there was some coded thing on the back of the Declaration?
Right.
I just said, look, the real secret's on the front of the Declaration. That's the greatest thing, that we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's the greatest thing. And so you can make up fiction about Leonardo, but the fact of Leonardo is so much more rewarding and satisfying and inspiring.
No, and I can't wait to dive into it. Again, Mr. Ken Burns, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Great to be with you, Lola.
If you want to hear this conversation again, it is on the podcast section of our website at 103cir.com. It's the Early Show. Good morning.